Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go.
All right, so today we're going to talk about Boots Riley's new movie, Sorry to Bother You, but you got something off the top that you wanted to talk about.
No, nothing major. Just wanted to ask you if you saw the new Shazam and Aquaman trailers.
Yes, I did. And Shazam, actually, I don't know anything about Shazam. But it looked interesting. It looks like they're trying to have fun with it, and that's DC, right?
That's DC, correct. That's why
Okay.
you see Superman and Batman in the trailer. You don't see them, but you see a Batman Batarang, and you see a newspaper article with Superman
That's
in
right.
it.
Okay, got
On
it. I
it,
do
whatever.
remember seeing the Batarang in there, and I don't remember the other article thing or whatever. But yes, it looks interesting, and it looks more interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting to pay any attention to it, but it at least piqued my interest. And then, what was the other trailer? that you wanted?
Aquaman.
See, there you go. I don't know. Aquaman doesn't really. I like Amber Heard. I think she looks very nice, and I don't really have anything else to say about it, I guess. I don't know. I'm just, I don't know. I've heard good things about it, and that James Wan, the director, is really trying to do right by Aquaman. But once again, I don't have the history with the comics, so I'm not really sure what that even means. What about you?
Well, Shazam looked great. I am a big Shazam fan. Used to be called Captain Marvel, and for legal purposes, he can't be called Captain Marvel anymore. He was called Captain Marvel when he was Shazam because he says Shazam to become Shazam. Now, apparently, in the comic books, because of legal reasons, when they licensed the Marvel Captain Marvel, wow, say that 10 times, they are no longer allowed to use that term in the DC world. So now he has to say Shazam with a purpose. He can't just say it and become Shazam. He has to say it with a purpose, which I think is a little lame, but it is where we're at with it. I was a little concerned with them going so lighthearted with it, but it does look really fun. It looks like a fish out of water. The kid who's playing Billy Batson, who is the younger version of Shazam, or the boy who turns into Shazam, he's perfect looking. Like, if you had just shown me a picture, I would have been like, that kid looks like Billy Batson. And they have, it looks like they're setting up stuff for, which I'm not sure how they're going to do, because the character's name is Captain Marvel Jr., the young kid who is handicapped in the trailer. He becomes Captain Marvel Jr., and there's a Mary Marvel, so I'm not sure how they're going to do that, if they're going to do that, but the young kid who has the walking device in the trailer, the disabled young man, he is wearing the colors of Captain Marvel Jr. He's wearing a blue jacket with a red thing. And so it's basically a blue costume just like Shazam's, but blue. So anyway, it's going to be interesting that if they set that up. And I like the whole disposition that they're going with. Now, this whole thing about how he's still a 14-year-old boy inside this huge superhero body, that's kind of a new thing, and I'm adjusting to it. Usually he is almost the next best thing, if you will, to Superman, although as a kid I liked him better as Superman. I read more Shazam comic books than I did Superman. It's just something that I did. So, he's supposed to have the wisdom of Solomon, and, because Shazam spells Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, Mercury. That's where Shazam comes from. And he has the power of those gods. So he has speed and flight and all this other stuff. So I don't know how they're going to go about doing that, but it does look fun, and it does look upbeat, and it's colorful, so I'm all about that. I hope they don't go too far to the tongue-in-cheek type of thing. It doesn't look like they're going there, but overall, I thought it looked really, really good. If I didn't know it was coming and I all of a sudden saw it, I would have been really excited about it. I still have to buy into the whole thing of a 14-year-old boy in this Superman's body, but that's where they're going with it, so it's okay. Aquaman, I think it looks like it has trouble. I think the undersea worlds, because it's going to be like the 8 realms of Atlantean environment. I'm not even sure what they call it. So it looks like it's going to have some trouble with people riding fish and sharks and all that other stuff, and just looks hard pressed to buy into. But I will say this, it looks like they're sticking to their original idea that she gets washed ashore, she falls in love with his dad, meaning the queen of
Atlantis?
I just forgot. Yes, Atlantis. I was going to say Atlantia. That's not a word. So that all looks correct, and it looks like his brother is going to be the king, and Black Manta looks good. That's the guy with the big black bubble head with the big red eyeballs that shoot laser beams. Looks better in still photographs than he did in the trailer, but it looks like they're going to stick to that, so I'm okay with that. I just think it's a hard thing to pull off. It's just a big, epic ocean battle. It's just, with the monsters and all that other stuff. What it does look like they're doing is creating their own world, which is great, and it looks like different creatures are going to exist other than orcas and sharks and all that other stuff that you're expecting to see. So that might make it a little bit easier to buy into this world. But it looks like they're taking it seriously, so I'm good with it.
All right, yeah, that will be interesting. It did. I got a little, and maybe it's because I was watching it on a little YouTube window, but I got a little bit of like a Gungan vibe on like the, flying through the water and stuff. It just seemed like, episode 1, and I was just like, oh, okay, that was weird, but
yeah, I felt that way too.
So I don't know. Maybe we're just. I don't know. I don't know how you put that on screen and not get that kind of a vibe. But yeah, I can't say that I'm gonna rush out to see Aquaman when it comes out. But we'll see. So with enough pressure from you, maybe we can do a podcast on it. But
well, you sat through Justice League, so you're primed and ready for anything DC can't do. So
I did, and also I think that I didn't really have a problem with Jason Momoa in that movie. I think he did what he was asked to do. So I don't know, but so yeah, it might be interesting. Maybe my interest will peak at some point in that project, or in that before it actually comes out. So my interest has definitely been piqued in this movie, though. Sorry to bother you. Once I saw the trailer and kind of heard a little bit about it, the fact that we have this movie where you've got a telemarketer who, when he calls people, he gets dropped into their living rooms in this weird kind of surrealist setup, and then he finds out that he does a lot better selling when he puts on a white voice, which is actually, although the character Cassius Green, the main character, is played by Lakeith Stanfield from Get Out and Atlanta and all that stuff. His voice is actually David Cross, who's a comedian and has been in a couple of movies and other things, and so who has like a really stereotypical white voice, and so he gets better at selling, quote unquote. He's a great salesperson using this white voice, so that intrigued me right there. They're making a movie about that. I'm interested, because it sounds like it's going to tackle some things that are not talked about usually in movies, or at least not talked about in that way. So that is the one thing that interested me. And as I heard more about the movie over time, you kind of find out in a roundabout way that things get weird. And then once I found that out, I was like, okay, I don't want to know any more. So I didn't watch any, I didn't read any reviews or watch any trailers about it, because I knew things were going to get weird, and boy, do they. So what about you? Did you how did you hear about this first?
Well, you talked about this a while ago, maybe when we talked about trailers or Tessa Thompson or Lakeith Stanfield. Something came up, and I saw a trailer, and I thought, okay, well, this is interesting because of a couple of reasons. I used to be a telemarketer. I've been in sales my whole entire life, and I love both those two people. And I'm becoming obsessed with Tessa Thompson.
Me too.
She is so clear in everything she does. She's clear. There's not a spot. There's not a dash. There's not a period in the wrong place. There's not a comma in the wrong place. She makes clear choices that work. She's a standout in Creed, which is what brought her name to me. I think I've seen her before, but who is that? Who is that? After I saw the movie. And that's how I learned her name. And then she shows up in Westworld season 1 at the end of it. And she takes over a show that has been fully developed up to that point and is as interesting as any show could possibly be. It's mind-blowing. And then she has to come in and basically wipe the floor with Anthony Hopkins. And you're thinking, this is not going to happen. This show is so powerful. She's just going to be a minor character. She's going to come in, and she literally overtakes the show for the few episodes that she's in. I don't know if it's a quality you can learn. I don't know if you can teach it. I don't know if she just has it as a human being. Plus, she wears those beautiful dresses in Westworld, and she just looks fantastic. Not that that's a big deal, but on top of all the talent, she's a beautiful woman too. Not that that matters on any level, but, let's give it to her. So I saw this trailer and I thought, okay, this is interesting. Telemarketing, white person voice, code switching, because that's what they call that. And I just saw a whole thing on, I forget where I saw it. It was online. It was some documentary where they were talking about code switching for black people. And being a gay man, you do learn that there are things that are accepted and not accepted in this world, language-wise, that people would call your gay voice, your straight voice, all of that stuff. So there is code switching in my realm too, and you're careful about what you talk about around certain people. Of course, you don't want to be ever explicitly sexual or of a sexual nature in a business professional situation anyway, but there are certain things you can and cannot talk about. There just are. And it's gotten a hell of a lot better, at least for me it has. So I understand code switching on a different level than maybe a lot of people would. So it's like, okay, code switching, white person's voice, telemarketing. Okay, I get it. Then there's this sense when you see the trailer a second time, because I just happened to see it a second time, and you think, wait, there's something odd about this. There's something askew about this. And it reminded me of when I saw Repo Man. Have you ever seen Repo Man with Emilio Estevez?
No.
Okay. It's a good movie. You'd enjoy it. It's just it's on the edge of avant-garde, if you will, but it's covered in mainstream themes, okay? And so I remember seeing a trailer for that back in the day, then seeing the movie and just thinking, this is a strange movie, but strange in a good way. So that's where I went into it, but I had no idea that this movie was going to do the things that it did. And I'm not talking about the obvious stuff that we'll get to later on. I'm just talking about the subjects after subjects after subjects that this director has the balls to bring up and talk about. And even if it's one or two scenes with those subjects, he gets it in there. He makes a point. He makes you think about it, and he moves on. Does he bring it back? Sometimes he does. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to be so multi-layered. And when I got done with it, I texted you, I think Boots Riley is the smartest man in the world. And that's for a couple of reasons, and we'll get to that too. And then I went, no, maybe the universe. Because how do you do what he did? And he gets away with it because he just sticks to his guns. He says, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it in a new and interesting way. And I also finally left a new 3-word review for Twitter, which we haven't done. Did you see that? I said, sorry to bother you, 3-word review. No stone unturned. And that is the truth for me. He does not let anything go by the wayside in this movie. He talks about it all. And I think it's an important film. I think it's unusual and avant-garde in the best possible way. So that's where I originally came from it at. I thought it was just going to be like Office Space for 2018 about telemarketing and trying to make it in this world and being a young black man living in a garage with a beautiful woman who's an artist. And that's it. I had no idea it was going to be as deep and as dark and as rich as it is. And it's just extremely well done. I'm over the moon about this movie.
Well, I really enjoyed it too. And I think that the best case scenarios for these types of movies, I mean, this is a complete allegory. I mean, it is, everything means what it is, and it also means something else. And I think that, there's people that I think are good at that, and there's people that are bad at that. And I think Boots Riley, even though this is his first feature-length movie, I mean, he went to film school and all that before he became a musician and led his band, The Coup. And so he is kind of like returning to a different art form. I'm not even really sure why he decided to make this movie. I know it's been a movie that's been percolating for a while, but I do know that he's got, I mean, I believe he's a self-professed, Marxist, communist type of a guy. So he really believes the things that he's talking about. And I think that for me, at least, you don't hear those types of things, talked about. You don't hear Marxism talked about in a practical manner or even in an allegorical way now. And so, I mean, and that's because we're in a capitalist society here in America. And so, it's kind of cool that he's able to kind of make something and put it out there and hopefully spark talks about it, whether you agree with it or not, or whether you have serious problems with it. At the very least, hopefully it is palatable enough to at least be a jumping off point for conversations. So that's what I thought was really cool, that you can actually get the views of someone who really believes in the things that he's espousing, whether it's organization for workers or the comparison between slavery in the past to slavery today, whether it's in the movie it's the kind of like worry-free work environment where you work and you live and they pay for all of your food and you just work all the time, that kind of a thing. So I mean, he's bringing things up and he's putting things to the forefront and actually talking about them, but at the same time he's not just showing one point of view. I mean, one of the things that's even in the trailer where Cassius, the main character, is walking out to his car, and then this guy who's his landlord says, hey, when am I going to get my money? And he says, check this out. God made this land for all of us. Greedy people like you want to hog it for yourself and your family. And then the guy says, my family? I'm your uncle. So he's, and that's Terry Crews, by the way, who's awesome. But it's kind of saying that it's like there are platitudes, there are things that sound good, but then at the same time there needs to be practical ways to deal with these real issues. And I think that Boots Riley's not just saying like, why can't we all get along? Why doesn't everybody just run through a field of flowers? He's saying like, here's a couple of options, and here's where it can go if you take one route, and here's where it could go if you take another route, or at the very least kind of bringing all these different things up. So that to me is more interesting than even a documentary about Marxism in practice or communism in practice or the future of the United States if it was Marxist or if it was communist and all that stuff. That doesn't intrigue me as much as putting together a story and this allegory and then exploring that within the boundaries of that, which there aren't very many boundaries to this. I think that he definitely has a structure to the movie, and it's very fast paced. I noticed I've seen it twice, by the way. So I saw it again yesterday.
Oh, you have?
Yes, I saw
wow.
it again yesterday, and I was able to go see it again, and I'm glad I did because I caught a lot of stuff. This is one of those movies. I mean, like I'm gonna bring up Brazil because it's one of those movies where repeat viewings really do pay off, and you see so many small things. There's a lot of detail. And I know a lot of movies, nowadays definitely, they have detail built within them. But, in this movie, all of the choices are purposeful. I don't really understand all of them, but that makes me want to investigate more as opposed to, saying, as opposed to saying, there's no reason for this. I'm saying like there are so many reasons for so many other things in the movie. There's got to be a reason for whatever it is that you look at and you're like, I don't really understand that. Where I'm speaking in vague terms because I definitely want people to see this movie, and I'm sure you do too. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth watching in the theater and talking about with your friends and all that stuff. But we do need to get into some spoilers. What do you think?
I think the movie is a spoiler. The whole thing is a spoiler. And I also think that I was getting ready to talk about, well, who would I recommend this film to? Which friends of mine would I recommend it to? And I think I'm going to stop doing that, meaning putting that thought into my mind, because here's the thing. An interesting movie is an interesting movie. It doesn't matter who's going to like it or who you think should see it. And the fact that you have to separate certain films from people's taste is an issue for me, meaning we shouldn't have to. This film should be experienced by all people who like movies. That said, this is a very specific film. My father was like, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go see this movie for the podcast. He's like, I'll go see the movie. And I said, Dad, I don't think this one's for you. I didn't know how much it wasn't for him at the time, but I just didn't think it would be something he would be interested in. And it's just one of those things. He likes the big Harry Potter films and Jurassic Park, and that's fine. But for me personally, I'm going to stop talking about films as if I think that person might not understand it, so I'm not going to recommend it to him. As a matter of fact, it came up at the theater tonight before rehearsal actually, and I said, yeah, that's a movie that I'm finding a hard term to say. This movie is good, great, extraordinary. Avant-garde keeps coming to mind, but those terms just don't do it. It's a have-to-see experience. And they're like, well, what's it about? I said, a telemarketer, because I didn't know what else to tell them it was about. I said, it's about commercialization and being in this commercially driven society, and it's got all of these things that this director talks about, but you cannot be specific when you're describing the film. So that said, you're right. We have to start talking about specifics in this film, so they could be spoilers, and some will be spoilers for people who haven't seen the movie. So I definitely say see this movie. Try to see it in the theater. It's an experience seeing it so big because you cannot get away from certain things. And other than closing your eyes or going to the bathroom, you cannot get away from it, and that's important. And I think he pushes those buttons. Boots Riley, I think he pushes those buttons, but he doesn't have to push him too hard because he's putting it right there. And when you're forced, for lack of a better term, into having to watch something, 36 feet high, you cannot get away from the symbolism. You cannot get away from the metaphors, the allegories, all of the stuff that he's putting in there. And even if you don't fully understand it, which I probably didn't understand 75% of it, you get a visceral effect from it because it definitely has this feeling about it. You feel something the whole entire time, and it's sometimes you're uncomfortable, and sometimes it's humor, and sometimes it's, I never thought about that way. Or what would I do in that situation? So it's definitely something to see in the theaters. So that said, spoilers from this point on.
Yep. I will say the second time that I saw this movie, when I saw it yesterday, the lady next to me, a couple seats down, and right now we're probably like 3-4 weeks maybe into the movie being out, but this lady a couple seats down from me, she was just like laughing at everything at the beginning, like even things that you may not be, I don't know. The first time I saw the movie, like nobody was really laughing at them, but it just seemed to me like she really, really, really wanted to be at a comedy. And I think this movie does have a lot of comedic scenes in it, and comedic things that happen in it. But as the movie went on, and as things got more developed, and you kind of go more and more down the rabbit hole, like she was completely silent. And so it just seemed, it was interesting to me where like there's a particular point where you're kind of like, it's so, you dig in so much where you're just like, the humor is more of like just like a staying humor as opposed to laugh out loud humor. So I thought that was an interesting test case, and I was like, it's crazy how filmmakers can control the audience, and the great filmmakers have no problems doing that, and that's the power of art, and and movies can definitely do that. So all right, so I didn't really realize this until it was like halfway through the movie, but his name is Cash is Green. So, and they even kind of like check that a little later on in the movie if you don't get it, But I thought, I mean, that's an interesting place to start, because, and then also another interesting place to start this movie is where he's having like an existential crisis at the very beginning of the movie, because he just has no drive, he has no purpose, and throughout the movie, once he realizes that he's able to harness this, white voice, or he's able to succeed using this trick, for lack of a better word, that is where he starts seeing his purpose. And it's a serious thing for him that he now has a purpose, and he has to square that with what he feels like, and how he has to deal with what the company is doing. It's not even like, it starts with innocuous selling of encyclopedias, but then it ends up he's selling slave labor. So, but he's really good at it, so he's gotta figure all that out. And he actually allows himself to feel both of those things, which I thought was really interesting, instead of it just being, a cut and dried, like, oh, I can't do this because this is bad. They let him kind of ruminate in that, and you get to see, all of both sides.
Well, the complexity for me is that they sell this American dream, and it takes place in Oakland, so it's in America, and they sell this materialistic dream, and you have to do these things in order to acquire all of these material things. But then on top of that, not only do you have to do all of these things that are semi-questionable, although people do it all the time, and survival and needs are met based on altering who you are as a human being to a degree. In this scenario, it's his voice. It could be the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you part your hair, the way you color your hair, the way you wear your makeup, how you wear your tattoos. It could be any of that stuff. So they sell you this dream, and then finally you start to achieve the dream, and you become semi-successful, even though you're selling out to a degree. But that's okay, because we need things. We need a place to live. We need a good car without strings attached to the windshield wipers, which is brilliant, by the way. So we do this, and then you find out not only have you sold a little bit of your soul to be somebody completely different to get things and to survive, but you've really gone down a rabbit hole to the point where it's a point where you're part of this main huge machine that is doing something detrimental to our society. So here's the dream. Achieve the dream, become successful, and then you become successful, and you realize not only have you sold your soul, but you pretty much sold everybody else's soul underneath you too. So it's a complex idea that Boots Riley is putting out there, because why not wear a purple tie instead of a pink tie, or a green tie instead of a yellow tie? Because that's what your manager wants. If that's going to make you more money to keep your kids alive, and good food and all that other stuff, good Christmases and all that other stuff that makes life easier to enjoy, why not do that? It's not that big of a deal. But then you find out, well, if you wear the yellow tie, that means you don't like women that day. Or if you wear the green tie, you don't like gay people that day. And then it becomes this big, huge, complex thing. And you're like, wait, I just wanted $35,000 a year instead of $29,000 a year. How am I now completely in this game and this? It's almost warfare in a way. So it's a complex idea that he even sets out to begin with in the beginning of this film. Because this young man just wants to be able to love on his girlfriend without a garage door opening. He wants to drive down the road without having to, die in a rainstorm because he doesn't have windshield. He wants to pay his landlord, who happens to be his uncle, rent. So it's complex, and he does, and then it just spirals from there.
But what does he do when he does get enough money to pay his uncle? Does he get a car that he just isn't able to, that actually has working windshield wipers, or does he get a Maserati? He gets a Maserati. It's.
Well, there you go.
He goes up to the max on everything, and in fact, that's a really cool scene where he to show that transition, where he brings Tessa Thompson, who's Detroit is her name in the movie. He brings Detroit home, and they're making out, and then they're in the garage part, and then they fall in the bed, and then you get this really cool kind of like lo-fi transition where the bed gets bigger, and then the old TV splits in half, and the new TV comes up, and it's a flat screen, and it's bigger, and then the old lamp splits in half, and then the new lamp comes in its place. I mean, like, that's such a cool scene, and it's a great transition to kind of show it. It's like kind of overnight he's actually moved up to a different, the upper echelon of people, went from barely an apartment or barely a place to stay to a really, really nice apartment with a great, great view. And she goes with him. And she's, she's in it too. But I thought that was a really cool transition there.
Yes, it's the most original montage scene I've seen in a long time, because that's what that is. Traditionally, you would walk in and they would take a picture down and they'd put a picture up, and then you'd see the pictures being put up around the house, and then you'd see the carpets being changed, and them having the movers come in with the thing, and then him getting the keys from the car dealership. You'd see all that stuff. Instead, he does it in a completely new, different way. And actually, I think that's when the movie starts to really transfer over into something other than just a mainstream comedy at that point. It starts to get into a realm of filmmaking that you don't see a lot of filmmakers willing to go. And because what you have to do as an audience member is you have to accept that TV splitting open and it becoming a flat screen TV, which should be no harder to accept than watching them go to JCPenney's and buying the new flat screen TV and them carrying it home in that clipped montage that they normally do in all movies when those transitions happen. So it should not be that much more difficult to accept it, but it is not something you see often. But it's also a statement how one thing sprouts from another, one thing comes from another, you out with the old, in with the new. And I think that is when, and you could tell me because you've seen it twice, where the film starts to just take on, I wouldn't even say surreal, but it starts to creep into not your average normal Office Space movie. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it starts to move in a different direction at that point. I actually think some of the camera angles are different after that. Some of the way that he shoots certain things, the lighting is different. It all started to feel different. It started to feel like, and this is a weird analogy, but when you get bit by a mosquito, you see the mosquito, it bites you, and then it starts to welt up, and then it starts to itch, and then you itch the rest of the night until it goes away an hour later, whatever very well may be. You've seen all of those transitions, but something stays with you that is itchy, and you can't get it off your mind until it goes away. And at that point in the film, it becomes itchy, and you can't get away from it in the best possible kind of way. Yes, it's uncomfortable to get bit by a mosquito. That's not my point. My point is that it leaves something on you at that point, and you cannot get away from it. And itchy is the thought that comes to mind. It's like the inside of your coat rubbing you the wrong way, and the tag is in the wrong place. It's livable, but you're constantly aware of something has transitioned at this point. Strange little way to put it, but that's how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's once he actually goes upstairs the first time, once he goes up the executive elevator or whatever, the power collar elevator. And, it's, first of all, you have that weird keying in of the passcode the first time with with Miss Debauchery or Debauchery, whatever her name is. Yeah, that was
Hilarious.
funny. And so she goes through all of that, and like it's one of those things where it's that type of comedy where it's funny, and then it goes on for so long that it's not funny, and then it keeps going on, and then it becomes funny again. It's that kind of funny. And then he goes upstairs, and once you realize what he is actually selling, that he is selling, weapons and slave labor and all that stuff, that's when, to me, it like really kicks into gear. And what you're talking about, once he makes that first big sale, then he gets the money, from he gets the advance and is able to pay off his uncle and able to buy the Maserati and get the new the new apartment and all that stuff. And then it just kind of like starts to eat at you from there. And that brings up the interesting character who we don't know his name. It's Mr. Beep. And
Dash. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I love
that.
It's written as a dash in IMDb.
That's right. Yeah, like Mr. Underlined. Yeah, Mr. Dash. Yeah. And his, white voice is Patton Oswalt, who's another comedian. And so that's who is like another person now. I've seen him in a bunch of stand up and things like that, and it's just like, oh, okay, I can see that. And he's played by Omari Hardwick, and that character, to me, like especially the second time watching it, has a lot of significance. And I think, did you notice he always had an apple? Always had an apple in his hand. Sometimes he ate it, sometimes he didn't eat it, but he always had an apple.
I remember him eating an apple or some kind of piece of fruit, but I don't remember him always having something. But now that you said that, in the back of my head, I think I did notice that.
He always had an apple.
What's that mean?
He's got a one eye it's gone. And he also, the other thing that I really keyed in on is that, we're going to kind of jump forward a little bit, or a lot actually, is that when Cassius is meeting with Steve Lift, the Armie Hammer character in this movie, and he goes into Steve Lift's office, the first thing that Lift does is he throws him something, and he catches it, and it's a green apple. So there's a lot of horse metaphors and all that stuff that we can talk about, and horses eat apples and all of that. But I'm wondering if the apple may be representative of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil from Adam and Eve, in the Bible, where you've got someone who actually has that knowledge, and now this knowledge is being passed on to Cassius in the movie. So, and I don't know if Mr. Blank is supposed to represent the snake in the Garden of Good and Evil. I don't really know, but I'm kind of reaching, but at the same time, like, I could totally buy that symbolism really working in this movie. So why else would they bleep out his name? I don't understand why they would bleep out his name.
Well, one, it's funny after about 3 or 4 times because you don't know why. So you're almost laughing at the uncomfortableness of not knowing and the fact that they continue to do it. And anything after a few times gets comedic. What's it, 3 times, and then it's can't be repeated, and it's no longer funny. And then, like you said before, you bring it back up again. But so, okay, that's interesting to me because after 5 years of doing this podcast, we've learned, or I have learned, that it really doesn't matter what that means per se. It's what we took from it that is as important as what they meant. It follows. I reference that all the time. I thought it was this big, metaphor about HIV, and it turned out it was just a dream or something like that, which I still don't buy into that fully, that's all he thinks it is. And that's why people are asleep in that movie. It follows throughout the whole entire movie. It's a horror film where people actually sleep. I love that, by the way. But I took something completely different from it, and that's what it is. We've talked about this early on in doing this podcast, that art is in the eye of the beholder. So if that's what you got from it, then that's what it meant to you. And I think that even if you found out what the explanation was, it would not hold up to how you felt while you were watching it, and that's what you thought. So I say go with that, and I can see why you're saying that. But here's my question about Mr. Blank. Why did he look the way that he looked? I kept trying to figure out what his look was about because he reminded me of somebody with that very specific mustache beard thing and the patch over his eye and the bowler, and he was dressed a certain way. He reminded me of Mr. Monopoly.
Huh.
But then I was trying to but Mr. Monopoly doesn't have a patch over his eye. He looks specifically like somebody that I know in my
Could it be
past.
Mr. Peanut?
Not my past. Yeah, maybe, but Mr. Peanut doesn't have that beard. It's that beard. He looks like a barbershop quartet singer who is a cousin of Nick Fury, who decided that what's hip and happening in Oakland now are black bowlers that happened in the 1950s. His look is so specific, it has to mean something. But what was interesting to me is I don't even really care what it is, actually. I'm on some level wanting to know, at the same time not wanting to know. It's how he made me feel every time he was on screen that was important. As if I recognized the character and I should be comforted by the character, but I wasn't. And it could be that, if he is the snake of the tree of knowledge, then actually that snake is just doing its job. Like the snake is just, why blame the snake? There's a Facebook meme that goes like that. Why blame the snake? He's just tempting you. That's what he's supposed to do. And the apple is good and this tree of knowledge is great. And why should God have all the knowledge? Why shouldn't you have the knowledge? So he's doing his job. So if you put those two things together, how I initially felt and what you just described, then I think Boots Riley would be happy with what we're talking about because we felt something about that character. Whether or not we can define it, I don't know. I think it's interesting that his code switching voice is different but the same, and it's nothing like what you would imagine that man would sound like if he was trying to put on that voice, which is fascinating to me because I think who does Lakeith's
Stanfield
code switching voice?
It's David Cross.
That sounds to me like more what Lakeith could drum up if he tried to do that.
He does that. He puts his hand on his nose and says, "Hey, Mr. So-and-so," like a kind of nasally version of that.
Right, but the Mr. Blank guy doesn't sound like he would sound like that at all. So much so that when he does talk in his normal voice, which is just a brief period in the film, it's so jarring that I'm thinking to myself, did I get used to him sounding like that? And do I get used to people sounding like what I think they're supposed to sound like? And do they go home and they're like, don't sound like that at all? And I felt bad because I got used to it. That guy, it never comes across as completely natural. But as for the fact that he might be the snake in the Garden of Eden at the Tree of Knowledge, I don't think that's so far-fetched. I really don't. I think your whole thing about horses and apples and all that other stuff is a little bit more on the nose because of the film, but I don't know. Who knows? In a way, I don't want to know. Here's why. Because I felt so many odd sensations during this film, and I mean that as a high holy compliment. Odd sensations are good in this sense of the word, that I loved what I felt during the film. Good, bad, or indifferent, uncomfortable or uneasy or whatever it was, or confusion or complete understanding, that's what mattered to me, that I felt a certain way when Mr. Blank was on screen. So that's where I leave that. But I don't think you're far-fetched by saying, tree of knowledge, snake, apple. Makes sense.
So we haven't really talked about the whole worry-free subplot that they start very early on, which is, it's kind of like, come live here, we'll pay for all of your food and all of your housing, and then you can just work for us, and it's like the dream. And then they also bring up the entertainment and how it's like, get the crap kicked out of you for cleaning it up for the little kids that are listening. It's like I got the crap kicked out of me. And that's not far off, I think, where there are some shows where people do get, just like completely beat up. I don't know if we have a lot in the United States that are like that are just like people getting beat up on TV.
Well, I don't think that's literal, but we do have people eating bugs and sleeping in.
There are other countries.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there are. There are. But, I guess you could say that American Gladiator, not American Gladiator.
Ninja Warrior.
Ninja Warrior, where they have to do those extreme things to get across those obstacle courses are what they're going for in this film. Are there people in other countries who get beat up on camera?
Oh yeah,
is that for real?
I'm not sure which.
Really?
Like, if it's Asian countries where they have like people putting themselves in situations where it's like pretty impossible to win in these situations, and they just get knocked off of ledges or into pools and things like that. But it's at least with American Ninja Warrior, it's actually like somebody has a particular amount of physical prowess and they are meant to actually go through and actually succeed, but they may fail. But you're rooting for them to succeed, not necessarily for them to fail spectacularly. Whereas in these other shows, you're definitely rooting for people to fail. But it's a lowest common denominator thing.
Yeah, I think that's just a general statement about TV and commercialization when it comes to TV and what people are willing to watch as TV. I don't even think a person getting beaten up on TV is what they were necessarily representing, but all of these reality shows and all of these people who are reality stars that are famous because of just being famous or because they did something in their past and it was capitalized on, and now they're household names who have opinions that influence people of politics. That's what I think they're talking about. That TV has gone so far to the extreme that we are where we are.
Well, no, it's just, you're right. It's just an absurd eventuality. It's like if things keep going on this trajectory, we're going to get to the point where the most popular show is just people getting beat up. Like, we're just going to cut to the chase of like people getting beat up. And same thing with, I guess what he's saying is about the, the worry-free setup where, we just have companies that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And, even in, tech companies where they are pretty much setting up things kind of like this, where it's like, you don't need to go home because you can just stay here and keep working, and we'll make sure that you've got a gym and a cafeteria that's open 24 hours a day and all the coffee you want to drink and, a cot you can sleep in, and, you could just stay here and work, and we'll handle all the other the other things so that you don't have to, lower your productivity. It's so, it's so much better. We can get more work out of you if you never leave the campus. And that's definitely a thing in certain tech companies, especially the larger tech companies. So, I can see that, where it's the company saying like, we're doing this for you, but ultimately they're doing it for themselves. They're doing it for their bottom line to maximize profit.
Well, let me interject this. There are companies that people shop at every day in America where the factory workers in the other countries that produce these products do sleep in their apartments, do sleep underneath the roof of this company, and they have to pay rent back to the company out of their paycheck from working for the company. So that does exist. I'm not sure it exists to that extreme in America. I don't think it does, but it definitely...
No, they're not forced to. Yeah,
well, no, here's the deal. You can't get a job at that factory making the products for this American company unless you live in their...
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Foxconn, right? You're talking about Foxconn and they make phones and all that stuff.
I'm talking about a bigger organization. I don't want to name them. It's He Who Must Not Be Named. It's a huge corporation and company that is in America. But you cannot get a job there unless you live in their apartments. And you cannot live in their apartments unless you automatically say they can take this amount of money out of your paycheck once a week or twice a week to pay for your rent. And then if you no longer work there, you're still stuck living there, but you can't pay rent because there's no place to take the money out of. It's just this really bizarro catch-22, and they're living in things the size of broom closets for real, like not just a term. It's ridiculous, and it's sad. So that kind of stuff is happening. Definitely. I think in this movie, he's making a point about commercialization and selling your soul to the man in order to make money to buy things is just not a great idea, regardless of the reality of the situation. Just like he says in Fight Club, you end up the things that you own end up owning you. That's the truth. And I think this movie just takes that way, way to the nth degree and says, yeah, you have to be careful. Why do you need that specialized couch from wherever? Why do you need it? It's a couch. If you can sit in it and it's clean and it's, reasonable and durable, why do you need the one with the name on it or the one with that shines a certain way or looks a certain way, or the phones? Everybody's standing in line for phones. It's just mind-boggling to me. I get it to a degree because I've stood in line for tickets for concerts. I've stood in line for products before, and I understand standing in line for sales and all that other stuff. But after a while, it's just like, wow. You are selling part of your soul for a product that, one, won't work in 5 years anyway, and will change. Fashion changes in a heartbeat, so it's not going to be the most fashionable thing 5 years from now. So why go into that? I think that's what he's talking about. Although literally there are this slave labor-esque factories that totally exist in this world. So it's literal and figurative in this film. That's what makes it so, the vibration of it is hard to deal with sometimes. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, you're right. People don't like they don't like that stuff being brought up, and they don't like that being shown to them in such relief. And so that right there, you also have something to point to, right? You have the Steve Lift character who's kind of at the head. He's the tip of the spear for all of this. And he is, played by Armie Hammer, and he is, chewing the scenery, obviously, in this role. And he doesn't have, he's only got a couple scenes, really. But he's a hateable character very, very easily. And just the way that he interacts with the people around him, and especially how I don't know, did you notice there was little things, like when he meets Cassius at the first time that they meet at his party, and it's Mr. Blank, and he's like, hey, you need to meet this guy because he's doing really great. And he Armie Hammer tensed up. And then Mr. Blank was like, oh no, he's a good one. Like, kind of like this, I'm assuming it's like, oh wait, who is this black person that is right here, that is in my midst?
Yeah, you see a black person walking down the street and you roll up your window. That's what that reaction was for me. Yeah. So yeah.
And then he's like, oh, okay, so you're actually somebody who's benefiting me. And so now I'm going to let you into my circle, or I'm going to, show interest in you, or at the very least interact with you. So that's, that's telling right there. And all the choices that he makes as a character, as far as reducing Cassius down to like, oh, you're a black man from Oakland, you must have gangbanger stories, so let's hear some, or you definitely know how to rap. And then we get, it's obviously telling of what he's asking of Cassius, but then the way that Cassius deals with that, and the way he kind of capitulates to, once again, lowest common denominator of, what is the thing that all of these people, almost all white, want me to say? And so that's what he does when he's, when he's standing up there and can't rap very well. And so he's just like, this is ultimately what they want. They just want me to say, just to say these words, and that's all. That's all they're looking for. They're looking for an not an ideal, but they're looking for a um, what they think is what rap is, as opposed to anything else. They're looking for the most basic thing. And you notice that the people who weren't yelling back were Mr. Blank and Armie Hammer's character, Steve Lift. He was just watching. Steve Lift was watching, and I think it may have been at that moment when he decided that he wanted Cassius to be the Equisapien Martin Luther King Jr. I guess, when he's like, okay, this guy will go to whatever length to get these people on board with whatever he's trying to do. So that, I think, is kind of, that may be what he was thinking at that moment. And then after that, that's when, all that other stuff happens downstairs, because it gets real crazy at that point. And did you notice, like, he's wearing like a robe, not like a shawl or something? Like, there's just weird things going on.
With long boots on. Yeah. But it reminds me of somebody who is a billionaire who doesn't have to have social standards that other people might have. He's not wearing a kilt. He's not wearing a dress. He's not wearing a robe. He's wearing something in between. It's a wraparound.
It's like a towel. He's like wearing a towel, but it's not a towel. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, but it's long, but it's more of a light material than towels. But let's go back to the wrap really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Here's why I will repeat at least a couple more times, I hope, that this movie is no stone unturned. He taps into something, Boots Riley does, at this point, because not only does he talk about the commercialization of music and what people's idea of what rap music is, he also talks about a very touchy subject in rap music, using certain words for profitability, certain words for artistic reasons, and then he turns it into, once again, the lowest common denominator of, I'll just repeat this one particular word, like you said, that people are wanting to hear, and it's going to sell. It's a statement on top of a statement on top of a statement, underneath a statement, on the side of a statement. It is so brilliant, because when you see that crowd getting into the song, and the song almost starts to take off and completely work as a song, you think to yourself, man, what is it that modern day music is selling? Is it selling an artistic endeavor? Is it selling a idea of what makes people who don't really understand this style of music feel comfortable? What is it? It questions so many things and answers quite a few questions, because people don't care what the content of this music is, not meaning rap music, just the music in the film, the song in the film. All they care is they recognize it, they feel the beat, and they move on, and they start like going crazy, like he becomes a rock star in that immediate
and it
moment.
Also gives them license to say those words too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole nother thing and layer, that no stone unturned. He brings up subject after subject in this film, and he multi-universes it. There's so many different layers to things that it's almost too much to take in at one time. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to run out and see this film again immediately. I will see it again. I know I will. It will start to creep up on me again, and meaning that I will start to want to see it, and it will start to creep in the back of my mind, is I guess what I was trying to say. But it's so layered that it's almost too complex. It's too much to take in at one time. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. Because you're sitting there thinking, is this about the N-word? Is this about rap? Is this about commercialization? Is this about what white people's expectations of rap is? Is this about just selling a song that's got a good beat? What is this? And the answer is, it's all of that stuff.
And you got to remember, this is coming from a musician too.
Right. Absolutely right. That's probably why the song actually starts to work in a way. The melody, if you will, the beat, if you will, starts to work. It just does. And that's important because if it never did, you wouldn't buy into the fact that people were just yelling and screaming and using the word and all that other stuff. You have to start to buy into it. So the mind that created all of this, I can't imagine what it's like inside that person's mind, because this is not just, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, one good idea that just sparks a 2-hour movie, whatever it may be. This is like a billion one good ideas, and he just spins it around. It's like he comes up with an idea and he starts to move the Rubik's Cube around it to get the colors to match, and you see that all the orange on one side match now, and then all the yellow, and then eventually the subject starts to turn, and all the green and all the blue, and then finally he locks into it what the subject really is about, but yet you still have all these multicolors of squares that you're looking at, and you're not really sure what to look at or what to feel, but you know there's a complete picture there somewhere. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a feeling. There's a feeling throughout this film, like he is trying to say something, and I'm not sure I understood it completely, but I felt it completely.
And I think he's trying to say something about visual art too, and performance art with the Detroit character. So she's the second time I watched it, I think there was a line in there, and it's when they're both kind of laying in bed in the nicer apartment, and he says something about it's right before he says, like, you just sell all of your art to rich white people. And he said something before that was along the lines of, like, you don't appreciate this because you already had it. I think he said something like that. So her character may be, if that's true, if what he said, if that line is actually in there, then she may be someone who came from an affluent background and who has decided to, be a performance artist, be a visual artist, and shun all of that, all the stuff that she had growing up, but put her in a position where she could rent out a whole, building to do an art show, things like that. So yeah,
Well, isn't there a conversation about her name and where her name comes from? She says something about her parents when he says Detroit. That's an interesting name. She says something about, my parents decided to name me this because
she just said my parents wanted me to have a name that was American. So I think okay. So I think the Detroit name is the antithesis of a culturally African name, where a lot of African American people will name their children, may name their children a classically African name. Not Africa, yes, a name from Africa that has historical roots in Africa. So I think that's kind of like saying, like, because if you're saying, like, man, why don't they name their kids, normal names like John and Tim and Jason? It's kind of like that may be a statement along. It's like, oh, so you want a really American name? Well, we're going to name our kid the most American name. It's Detroit. Like that kind of a thing. I don't think that's what her parents were thinking. I think that's, I don't think that's what the characters of her parents were thinking, but I think that's what maybe like Boots Riley is saying, like, oh, she's got a really American name. It's Detroit.
It's not like, you don't think it's that whole deal about if you see somebody's name like the Martin character, Shanae, if you see Shanae on an application, you're probably going to pass it by because it's not your traditional American name. So that when she said that, and I knew she said something about her parents, but I couldn't remember what it was. But when she said that, I thought to myself, I think that's a statement about all the people who make up names. They add two names together, whatever it may be. It might be a traditional African name with an American name, or it might be a completely made up name, or, I know a lyric, I know a limerick, I also know a rhythm. all of these names, and only 2 of those 3 people are African American. So I thought it was a statement about that why are we not taking people's names for what they are instead of what we think they may be? Because I know somebody who was named Tequila. Yeah. And it was spelled like the drink, but there was a letter different, I think. But it looked like tequila is what it looked like when it was spelled. It's weird. And she changed her name to get into this job. And, Social Security numbers and filling out applications and filling out all that eventually came out. And she felt really bad because she had to change her name in order to conform to what people thought was normal, even though she was normal. She wasn't anything that this name might represent to somebody who doesn't understand that that's just what her parents decided to do. And so I kind of thought it was that. I thought it was a statement on that because Detroit as a name is as ridiculous sounding to people as all of these other names might be stereotypically ridiculous to people who don't understand them. So that's what I took from it.
That makes sense too. I think, I think we're both kind of talking similar things there.
But once again, it's brilliant because it's just a name. It's just a name. It's brilliant. It's so layered, but it's just a name.
But it's got
her performance
meaning. Yeah, that's the thing. So
absolutely.
All right, I think that. Well, I mean, obviously her performance was great, but the character as a performance artist and as a as a visual artist, I'm not sure if. Obviously she puts on that British voice when she's having her art show, who, by the way, the British voice is Lily James, who played Deborah in Baby Driver, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, but that's crazy because I thought that was Tessa Thompson. I thought that was her doing.
She does. Tessa Thompson has a good, well, I mean, she was in Thor Ragnarok. She used it and it sounded great, but there were some lip sync things. I knew it was a voiced over performance, those things, because the lip sync wasn't exactly right. Like how she held her mouth on certain words was different than how Lily James said those words. So I mean that's I don't know, that was a little annoying, but anyway, that's the first bad thing I've said about this movie. But don't you think that's kind of on purpose? Don't you think that's on purpose that if you don't already know that it's a dubbed-in voice, you should know? And actually, don't they say something about that in the film at some point? They say something about, somewhere along the line, something about a dubbed voice comes in, doesn't it? No? Okay, I can't think right now. But I thought that was on purpose because I did notice some of the dubbing was just a little bit off, but I think that's on purpose because I think you're supposed to be in on the not joke, but the knowledge of this idea that people have to code switch their voice in order to adapt. And the fact that she does it when she doesn't necessarily have to. There's no reason why she needs to sound British in that scene. To be accepted more in the art world, actually, that's the world you would think that she'd be accepted in no matter what, although that's not true too. And that's a statement in amongst itself that even in this free-flowing art world, you still have to conform to certain things and, rich people buying your art. But I thought the dubbing was a little bit off on purpose. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm still trying to figure out what the whole reason behind like her performance part where she's reciting a couple lines from The Last Dragon and is is getting pelted by bullets. I mean, I understand the shell casings, and I guess the sheep's blood is just blood, and they're supposed to represent blood. And then the cell phones, where she talked about the particular, it's not cobalt, but whatever that element is that is necessary that is coming from Africa, and saying, I guess she's saying like if you're using these things, then you're doing it's like throwing a cell phone at me by using a cell phone, or I don't know. I'm still trying to. Performance art is tough for me. Like the specifics of that kind of a thing. I'd much rather like dig into the little pieces of a movie like this than having to figure out that performance art, because that can be all over the place. I really don't know where you could go a bunch of different places with that. Um, but you do get to see Cassius kind of like stick up for her in quotes, I guess, but that's not what she wants. So it's rough. We haven't talked about the Steven Yeun character either, the organizer.
Okay, hold on a real quick second. Let me just make a statement about performance art. I don't necessarily get it either, but I think that maybe because of your broadcast engineer mind, you try to break things down and analyze it structure from structure, or inch by inch, or A plus B equals C type of breaking things down, when performance art for me is just like impressionist paintings, or and that's actually not a good comparison, because some impressionist paintings are literal. I think that you walk into a museum and you see a canvas with a splotch of red on it, a splotch of blue on it, a splotch of yellow, and you think it's just some 3-year-old threw this paint on this canvas, and you think, what is that? I could do that. What does that mean? I don't think those are the right questions. The question should be, how did you feel? What did you feel? And when the phone first hit her, what did you feel? When the blood first splattered, what did you feel? Why were you trying to, not you, just anybody, why is anybody trying to understand what she's literally saying as a quote from that movie? Maybe it's not the words, but the fact that those words are supposed to make us feel a certain way. So I don't know if performance art is, from my point of view, knowing you for a while, is anything that's ever really going to click 100% for you. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying it doesn't seem like the side of the mind or brain that you think out of. And because I've seen quite a few live performance art pieces, I've seen quite a few interactive things, I've seen things online, I have experienced concert films with performance artists, and I never really think I understand it, but I definitely feel like I am sensing something and feeling something throughout it, and I try to shut off the brain part that says this means this because of this. I just try to shut it off and try to understand what I was feeling when she was getting pelted with cell phones. Yes, you're correct. I think you taking from that she got hit by a cell phone because in order for you to use that cell phone, you have taken away from her homeland, or our homeland. I think that's a literal way of looking at that. And I don't think that's a bad way of looking at that per se, because that's the way that you saw it. But I'm wondering if you were to sit down and say, okay, 5 adjectives that described how I felt when I was watching that happen to her might explain that performance art piece for you better than trying to literally break it down and understand
it. It's another way of,
I don't know.
Thinking about it. That would actually make more sense to me, I think, when looking at some performance art. Steven Yeun plays Squeeze, and he's like the organizer of the call center workers. And then you've got Jermaine Fowler plays Sal, or Salvador, the Salvador character. That's Cassius's good friend who actually helped him get the job, I guess. You've got those 2 characters, and specifically the Steven Yeun is actually the most singularly written character, I think. I mean, he has a very specific goal, and he activates that gets things moving to actually make that goal happen. So I don't think his character necessarily grows or anything like that, but he's meant to be kind of like the catalyst and the person kind of pushing Detroit and Cassius into their, the situation that they're in. So, I mean, along with that, balanced with, Cassius becoming really, really successful in being a power caller and all that stuff. So it's a necessary character, but it just was, I don't know. And same thing with the friend. I guess you just needed somebody. He needed somebody to kind of bounce off of. And I think they were fine. I think they worked, and there's not much to say about their performances. For me, I don't think that I've seen Steven Yeun in Walking Dead. I watched like the first season or so of that, and I think he was in that, and I think he's been in a couple other things. But I never saw Okja, but he was in that, I guess, too.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still on Netflix, so I just
No, I think they're both standouts in their own right. I think that Squeeze is an important character, and I actually thought it was difficult that you end up liking him and that you end up understanding that he's attracted to Detroit and then she becomes attracted to him. And I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I bought that he was charming and sophisticated and could have seduced her even if the situation had been different. He had this quality about him. I bought into the fact that he was the leader of the pack when it came to, we're going to stand up, we're going to unionize, all that other stuff. As for Salvador has the unfortunate placement of the character that is the best friend in the beginning and then becomes unnecessary per se for the narrative later on. He's just not that much of a necessity. You learn everything about the main character through his best friend early on in the film, and you learn everything you need to know about Salvador that pertains to the narrative early on. And I don't think that makes their performances uninteresting. As a matter of fact, I think they're both standouts. And I was thinking to myself, if anybody's smart, they would take these two actors and figure out how to make them leads in some film because they are infinitely watchable. They have that quality and they do their job really well. And here's when Squeeze, I was thinking to myself, he's charming. He's sophisticated. I buy into him. I believe him. Is he kind of flirting with her? I think he is. I think she's kind of flirting back with him. That's interesting. You see that in the conversation in the beginning of the film in the car where you find out about her name. But then when he has to bow out at the end of the film, when she runs up and does the cliche kissing on the lead man at the end of the film and he's standing right next to him and he kind of has to bow out, he does it in such a graceful way, but it is character driven because he does that kind of side like, I'm stepping out of it, but I don't really want to because I really think I'm the best thing for this person. But you know what? She's into him. She's been into him. I knew it. I tried. It was great, but I have more respect for myself to bow out of this than to stand here and be, well, you were just with me yesterday, all that other cliche baloney that most characters would go through. He just bows out gracefully. And I was like, I like this guy. I like his character. I like the way the actor is playing him. And he is a standout for me. You're right. They don't do enough in the film to really make a cause for talking too much about them, but at the same time, I remember thinking about them once I left the film. I remember thinking about where their characters might be and what they might be doing and what happens next. And now that he did what the end of the film happens, what's going to happen next to Detroit, that kind of stuff. And without strong character-driven actors, you wouldn't get that. They would just be side characters. They come in, they do their part, they move the story along, and then they move out. But they're both standouts. Just thought I'd take a little bit more time for go supporting characters.
So yeah, well, I'm sure that Squeeze is also trying to like square the fact that now there are Equisapiens running around, and he's probably more interested in that maybe than than Detroit going back to her boyfriend. But so what happened when you saw that, horse person for the first time? Like, did you think it was going to go that crazy or like that kind of like, sideways in this movie?
Well, no, of course not. I had no idea it was going down that road. I had a sense. So when it happened, it wasn't as big of a surprise to me or a shock to me as it could have been, because there is a sense. That's why I was talking about the mosquito earlier. That's why I was talking about that itchy feeling. There is a sense something is coming that's bigger than everything we've seen up to this point. And once again, stone unturned, horse driven, horsepower. I mean, it's just so multi-layered. And to literally take it there, that's when I think the film actually turns into brilliant, genius idea. Because on paper, how did he get funded for it? They must have left that part out of the script, because anybody reading that, unless you know this guy, probably would have been like, yeah, dude, I'm going to pass. You have people with horse appendages and really the cliche known horse
Jeez.
stuff.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's there. It's there,
Yeah.
dude. And it's made a point of. So it's not like it's just there and I'm bringing it up.
No, I know.
It's actually made a point of. And there's a moment in the film it's used to entice somebody into something. So it's not just you see them running around and you have to see them anatomically correct. It's part of the movie, so it has to be talked about. As uncomfortable as it may be, this is the thing that makes us uncomfortable. Of all the things to talk about in this film.
Well, I think talking around it is weirder, but you're right. He does use, the.
Well, what do you want me to say? I mean, you tell me the proper terms to say, and I'll say it, because the movie terms are not the term that I'm going to use on the podcast.
We're trying to keep it, not
between
explicit,
you and
so
yeah, between you and I, we might have some jokes, but this is PG-13 here.
But I think that they drop a lot of hints after seeing it a second time, especially. They drop a lot of hints that there's like horse iconography everywhere, even on his book. Like, he's riding a horse on Steve Lift's book. He has horses in the background in the interview that they show early on in the beginning of the movie, and I think that he does a good job of hinting at things coming along or happening, and then even the plate that he snorts the catalyst, I guess.
Oh yeah,
it has a horse on it, so it's all kind of building to that thing. But seeing it for the first time and seeing the horse humans for the first time was it was definitely shocking. And then they do this. They kind of like, it seems like they're Boots Riley is kind of, he's obviously priming you for something extreme just with the stuff that they've shown you from the beginning. And even the things like, dropping the desk into people's, houses or workplaces, when he's on the calls. There is a surrealist, or even the scene where he gets right up next to the guy who's on the bidet, like on the toilet, the Japanese, or I'm assuming he's Japanese or Chinese guy who's got the cell phone company, and so that whole thing, there's just weird surreal things up until this point, and now we get the complete absurdist fact that they can make horse humans. And then they kind of bring you back down with that claymation, the claymation explainer, I guess, which I thought was actually kind of funny. But because you need something to kind of like calm you down. Also, the fact that Armie Hammer is able to calm down, Lakeith Stanfield, calm down Cassius Green to the point to get him back into the office, sit him down, and have him watch this video is amazing. That someone can go through that, see something that they've never, haven't even conceptualized before, and now they're able to sit there and listen to this explainer. But that's obviously the straw that broke the camel's back for him. It's just not doable. But he but he still even listens to the pitch that Steve Lift gives him, which is crazy. But yeah, man.
Well, let me say something about that really quick, because have you ever been a telemarketer or been in sales like that? Have you ever had a job like that?
Yes, I sold Cutco knives for a month. Do you know what those are?
A month. Okay. I have no idea.
It's just door-to-door knife sales.
Really?
But it's so perverse that they get you to sell things to your family members and adjacent like friends, and then they're supposed to give you leads, and then they just cannibalize neighborhoods and towns, and then they move to the next town. It's they're you know, the actual product is good, but it's the way that they get you to sell, and it is very similar to what the salespeople were talking to, the bagging and tagging, and it's like, know how much time to spend, get in, tell them about this, it is that
stick to the script.
Yeah. It's all of that.
Well, so then you've experienced in a month what this film is talking about, and I think that as extreme as the situation turns at the end of the film and you see the horsemen, the point is that even in all of that absurdity, he still sits them down to watch a video. And every single job that I've worked that has anything to do with sales or anything to do with fast food or anything to do with retail, you always have to watch these videos. And they're always these ridiculous videos of these very happy people who work in the company, and they're always making sure that they hit all of the boxes. You have the young Asian American, you have the young African American, you have the two white people, you have a male, you have a female, one person's a manager, and they're like, hey, John, come on in. Welcome to your first day at blank, blank, blank. And they all are similar to that. And they make you buy into, or they try to make you buy into this world in order to make a living. And I think that at the end of the film, him sitting him down, yes, you're right, it does kind of calm down the absurdity of the situation and does make it actually gel a little bit easier in one's mind when you're seeing the film. But it is a constant reminder that people in this world have to go through this every day of their life just to make enough money to put food on their table, to put shoes on their kids' feet. And they have to be, yes, sir, I've got that, sir. And we've had sitcom and movie and situational documentaries about this environment, people who go and be characters in Disney World and the whole length that they have to go to, where, now I'm not saying this happens at Disney World, but that's just the example, where you have to wear the mask all day long and you have to stand on your feet and you can't be seen smoking and you have to say hello to every child who you see walking through the park. All these seemingly not extreme things, when they're all put together, and the way that they do it and their kind of drink the Kool-Aid way are so absurd. But this film just takes it, boom, all the way there. Not only does he create his own slave workforce, he creates an actual workhorse for this slave workforce. And then on top of that, does all those cliche things that you do when you're trying to recruit somebody and watch those films. And it's just so absurd, but it really does make that point that when you're in those situations and you're having to watch those films and you're having to go, yes, sir, your name is really Mr. Smith, but I'm going to call you Mr. Squeezeball because we're selling squeezeballs. It makes you feel as crazy as the end of this film makes you feel. Somewhere in your soul, it twists something and it makes you not feel normal. And so what Boots Riley does is he just takes that so far to the logical absurdity that you get that same feeling, but you get it a million times stronger. And so for people who haven't been in telemarketing or haven't done sales or haven't had to come on in, welcome to blank, blank, blank. We are selling this today and it's worth this amount, blah, blah, and the discount and all. People who have not done that, who have not had to sell part of their soul just to make a paycheck, can sense what that feels like by watching this movie. And the end of this film does it in spades, man. It is amazing, because I started to kind of feel really bad for myself that I've been in those situations, and a lot of them, and I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. Not just literally telemarketing, because I have done, and I was really good at it too, because I stuck to the script. And all of that recruitment and the meetings that, Mrs. Debauchery or whatever her name is, the way that she does that is exactly how people do that in real life. And you're sitting there at 16, 17, 18 years of age going, is that a real person? Is she really talking like a human being? No one talks like that. And it's amazing that somebody was able to create a world in a film that elicits that feeling in somebody, even if they've never been in that world before. So kudos to Boots Riley. It's amazing.
He ends up like leaving there, and they end up finding the video that the Equisapiens made on his phone, and he decides to go to all the news shows, and like he shows the video to everybody, and everybody finds out about the Equisapiens. And it really, I maybe I was just still in shock, or trying to just like take in the movie the first time, but after watching it the second time, I didn't realize that because that information came out, that actually made the stock price for the company, Steve Lift's company, go up. Like it actually, all of everybody was, not everybody obviously, but like the worry-free stock went up because all of the business people were looking at the capabilities of worry-free and what they can do with these Equisapiens, and they're like, that's actually great, as opposed to saying you're not only enslaving people but changing them genetically forever. So that's a little extreme.
And then also he becomes semi-famous himself, because he goes on all the talk shows and he becomes the subject of what he's talking about. And not only becomes about him releasing that tape, but it becomes about him becoming a celebrity on some level by releasing the tape and having to speak to all the news channels and going to all the local events and all that other stuff. And that's a statement in amongst itself. But that actual statement that you're talking about is actually spoken about in the film a little earlier with the Coke in the head.
That's why he's famous.
Scenario. Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh, that's why he goes on the TV show and gets punched around so he can release that's why they want to see him. And then it takes on a whole nother world. And you're right, his stock prices go up. But actually, that's not that illogical, because we have people who, and trust me, I'm not making a statement about any particular person. I'm saying that this is happening in this world, and it is perplexing to me, and I don't necessarily understand it. I'm not judging them. Good for them. Do what you got to do to get through this world. But there are people out there who have become famous off of something that could have embarrassed other people in the past and would have been looked down upon in the past. And I'm trying to not speak specifically about anyone, because I don't want to offend anybody, and everybody's got their right to do what they've got to do. But when you have people becoming famous because of things that should not make them famous, and then you have their relatives selling that thing, I'm pretty sure everybody can figure out who I'm talking about.
I have no idea who you're talking about. There's no way that I understand any of this.
Are you being facetious?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
You're being very clear.
But I'm trying not to make a judgmental statement about those human beings and their choices, but I'm trying to make a statement about the fact that it does happen. The most illogical thing became something profitable. It's just crazy. And so when you take a film and you heighten it, people, that would never happen. I'm not so sure it wouldn't happen. So the fact that he takes it there is brilliant.
Yeah. And so then we get the end. It's interesting how the end kind of happens where, he releases the Equisapiens. The Equisapiens help them in, to handle the riot situation, and they, pretty much like take care of all of the cops, and then they leave. And I did notice the second time that the main Equisapien that opens up the door for him at the end, he's like, I'm so and so. I'm from East Oakland. He's like, my name's Demarius. I'm from East Oakland. That's Forrest Whitaker, who's a producer on the movie.
Yeah, I just saw
not
that.
like executive producer or anything. He's a producer, but still, I did recognize his voice. I thought that the first time I saw that movie, I was like, I recognize that voice, but I couldn't place it. And then, this time I saw that in IMDb, and then I definitely heard it that second time. But so they all leave, and then like there's this like kind of denouement, what you think is the denouement of, he's living back in his uncle's house, and he is giving his car to his friend and all that stuff, where it's kind of like and he's going back to work at the call center that I cannot pull the name of, but he's going back to work at the call center, which says a lot, actually. The fact that he's willing to work at that call center after what the call center, like the call center is still implicit in working with, the Worry Free upstairs. The power callers are. He's not a power caller, but he's okay working there. So that's interesting to me too. That he's, but I'm guessing it's just him saying, this is all I need. This is all I'm going to do. I'm just going to be a regular telemarketer. We don't know if he's going to use his, white guy voice or not. But that seems to be the end. And then we get the reveal of him becoming an Equisapien. And then ultimately him breaking down the door, and we can assume killing Steve Lift. Now, that's actually a big thing. That whole ending is huge to me, because the movie up until that point is bringing up a lot of things, and it seems like the end is possibly signaling a recommendation or an intent that Boots Riley and the filmmakers are saying. They're saying that, like, I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, he's okay with Steve Lift living just as long as he's not an Equisapien, but because he got turned into an Equisapien, he's gonna kill Steve Lift, or he's going to break into Steve Lift's house, and they're all going to go after him. So what did you get out of the ending? Because I'm still rolling it around in my brain.
Well, I think that you're pretty dead on for most of it. Sometimes you just have to do stuff to make a paycheck. You just have to. And maybe he reevaluated his life and he thought, okay, well, when I was working at the call center, I was good at that. I felt okay with code switching and changing my voice and doing these things that might be questionable for some people, but I made a certain amount of money. I was comfortable. I need to just live in this life. I need to just be this person in order to survive. And so I'm fine with that. I understand why people do that. Sometimes you become a manager and realize there's a lot of parts of your soul that you have to delve into that you don't want to give away anymore, and then you just are done. So you're willing to go back and just make an hourly wage because you know the place where you worked. You know you're comfortable with the product. You need to make a paycheck. So that's understandable. That's a statement that I'm comfortable with. I never thought about it until you just said it, that you're right. He's okay with working in that smaller place that actually feeds the larger place, but that happens all the time. And some of the corporations that I was talking about earlier on in the show, there are people who work hourly jobs every day who know that the corporation's shiesty, but they need to feed their babies, so they have to do what they have to do. They can't stop the cycle, but they have to be part of it. And a lot of times in this world, we are influenced by music and products and movies and songs and literature to the point where we don't even know we're doing things because we've been influenced by things. And when it comes to a commercialized world, you have subliminal coding in messages. You have different images that represent certain things, but it's just an ice cube in a drink, but really it's a naked lady if you pull back from it. It goes into your brain somehow and you're influenced by that. You don't know why you need that pair of jeans. You just want that pair of jeans. It's just, why kids want certain cereals when they're younger. It's because of the commercial or whatever. You don't know how you've been influenced by things. So maybe that's partially why he's okay with working just in the call center, because one, he's got to make a paycheck, and he doesn't know how much he's been influenced by the man or the upper part of society that's telling you you're just going to be a workhorse. But I never thought what you just said. I never thought that. I never thought, well, you're right. He's okay with him being alive, Steve Lift, until he becomes a horseman himself. Sorry, I got to say it like that now. And then he's going to take him down because he is transformed into something he doesn't want to be. So is that a statement about you can only go so far with treating people a certain way, but once you push them past the point of no return, they're going to fight back? But where is that line? Is that line, I'm okay with all my really cool stuff that I bought when I was rich in my kind of cool apartment that's a garage, as long as my girl's with me and as long as I can pay my uncle rent, I'm cool with having all that materialistic things that shouldn't mean anything to me as long as I can support my lifestyle right now. But once it gets taken to, like, I'll work in the call center, but once it gets taken to another extreme, you're not okay with how far your humanity and your soul has been tapped into to make somebody else money, especially on the backs of some other human beings. So that is interesting. I guess I'm going to have to think about it, because you just posed that question, and it's a great question, because why is he okay with that up to that point?
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm rolling it around in my head, and I'm wondering if it's like, if he's trying to say, like, I'm okay being a part of this system because it benefits me, it benefits other people. And we can all just kind of move forward and be okay with it. But then he realizes that it's fundamentally changed him. Like, he is now no longer a human. And because of that fundamental change, there has to be retaliation, and there has to be something that's more than just, picketing or demonstrations. It has to be a radical change. And that radical change is cutting off the head of the snake, whatever that is. In this movie, it's killing Steve Lift, I'm guessing. Although we never see him kill Steve Lift. But he does say some pretty bad stuff to him on the little... I think he says something like, I'm Cassius Green and I'm coming for you, or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, there's definitely a... you get the feeling that, Steve Lift's days are numbered. So, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the takeaway from the movie is what Boots Riley is trying to say, is that, capitalism's all well and good until you get turned into this thing that you're not, until you get fundamentally changed. So what's the way to deal with that? And it may not be just, the basic, ways that have happened up until now. There may be things that may need to be more radical. So that is a bold statement, if in fact that is his statement, and that's just me like gleaning from that what we've seen.
It's a great way to talk about a theme that is talked about in a lot of movies. Aaron Brockovich comes to mind. That small town where that company came and started to filter all that bad water through their society, they just wanted them to be honest, and they wanted them to line those pools of water with the right things so that chemical didn't seep into the ground. And then they lied to them, and then they try to buy their property so they didn't have to tell them the truth. And then they try to pay for their medical bills so they didn't have to tell the truth. But they fundamentally changed those people's lives by making that huge, devastating mistake and not caring, because for whatever reason, and it wouldn't have cost them that much more money to have lined those pools of chemicals with the stuff that wouldn't seep into the ground. It wouldn't have cost them that much more money, or maybe the thing was already built and they realized they didn't do it right. Who knows what they did? But they caused people to not have babies, to have babies that had cancer, people who couldn't have babies, animals dying, all because they lied about a chemical. So that's a literal way that people were affected by a corporation choosing to lie and to do what was best for their profit line, not what was best for human beings. So maybe you are right. Maybe it's a statement about, I'm okay with living outside of this chemical plant, and I'm okay with you taking care of my land and buying my land, and I'll move on. But when I find out I have cancer because of that, then I have to fight back. If you just did the right thing and I just moved along and you just took my land because you needed it, fine, or paid me for my land, fine. It's the same thing in Sorry to Bother You. He's okay with the corporation doing what they're doing because hasn't fundamentally changed him. So maybe you're right. When he is fundamentally changed, and the other under the bridge statement, there's a famous line about most people look at what's above the bridge. I look at what's underneath the bridge. I think Sam Shepard said that. I'm not sure. The underneath part of the bridge is that he's been turning a blind eye up to this point. Cassius has, because he's okay with the fact that he still makes money, even though he knows that this corporation is doing these bad things to people and changing these people, literally. He's okay with that. But then when it affects him, he has to make a stand and become righteous about it. Why didn't he do that before? Well, he actually tries to do that before, but the corporation ends up winning anyway. So, why didn't he fight to the end of his life till this corporation goes down, or whatever he could possibly do in his lifetime? Because he knows people are being changed into horses or horsemen. So why didn't he do something then? Because it didn't directly affect him. So maybe you're right. When it fundamentally changed him, and it's ironic that everything up to that point didn't fundamentally change him enough, he had to physically be altered into something in order to stand up. Just like somebody is physically altered by cancer, then they stand up. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't know, so you can't really fault them for that. But once they knew, they came together and stood. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting question, and I don't know if the movie is supposed to answer it. I don't know if we're supposed to answer it ourselves, but just having the question posed in this way, in this type of film, makes it way more interesting to talk about the question in general.
All right. Well, I've got a couple more things that I at least wanted to bring up and talk about, but I mean, these are just like things that we just haven't talked about yet. Did you notice the use of theremin in the score? That kind of like, ooh, like it's kind of like
like the Star Trek theme sounding thing. Yeah,
very, very much the same. Yeah, they used that in the score, and I think that's a good way of kind of like setting the tone of like, this isn't, this isn't just a regular old comedy. I thought that was a good way of at least setting the scene. The horse statue at the end, we didn't really talk about Left Eye, the Left Eye movement, which was modifying all the billboards and all that stuff. And Detroit was obviously a part of it. They made the Left Eye group, faction, whatever you want to call them. They made that statue that was like Steve Lift and, doing unspeakable things to the horse. And And then there's a guy kind of like bystander standing there and is like, hey, I wonder what that means, you know? And that's W. Kamau Bell, who has like a TV show, and he's a stand-up comedian, and so he talks about a lot of race issues, and it was interesting seeing him there, and being like, oh well, that's interesting that they put him there, because that's actually, you know, those are things that he would actually talk about in his act or in his show. So I thought that was neat. The green doors, there might be something there. You know, that's jade. That's not, you know, whatever. Olive.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, when he first goes down that hallway, didn't it kind of remind you of the downstairs basement in Get Out?
Kind of.
Something about that. Yeah, that something about the shot reminded me of, yeah, don't go down there. Bad things happen in hallways, in people's basements, down things like that. You need to go visit this movie called Get Out.
Yeah, and The Shining too. Like, it definitely had like that Shining vibe with the gold. I mean, like the uniform locked off, kind of like centered, symmetrical shot that does give you kind of that kind of a vibe. And the Terry Crews, like his character, the second time they see him, when he tells him he's thinking about going to Worry Free, and he said his diabetes are acting up, and then he takes this crucifix and like twists apart on it, and then something pops out, and he takes a pill. Like, is that like a crucifix Pez dispenser or something? Like, I don't know what that is, but once again, like, why would they have that in there? But that's it.
Well, I mean, you could go into 1,000 different directions about that. Once again, stone unturned. There isn't one in this movie. That's a statement about prescription pills in our society.
Religion.
That's a statement about belief in our religion. That's a statement about blind belief. That's a statement about, you have diabetes, here, take a pill. You have this, here, take a pill. Oh, you know, you'll get saved if you believe this. I mean, there is something in there. But there is just so many other things in this film that are larger than that I even forgot about that until you just said it. And I did notice it, and I did go, that's odd, because I don't think there is nothing unimportant in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The green doors, the olive doors, they're all important. And by the way, wasn't the 237, the room 237 in The Shining, didn't it have that kind of green color to the door or to the shower curtain or to the bathroom?
Yes, the bathroom was green. Color. The bathroom was green.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we're reaching, but there's nothing in this film that doesn't have a purpose. Mm-hmm. And whether or not I'm going to completely understand what he meant by it, I don't think I think you could spend a life, like you could teach a college course on this movie.
Yeah, you could.
And still not answer or ask all of the questions that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
But it comes down to one thing for me. And going back to the statue with Steve Lift, and the horse at the end, they start to interpret that as an art thing that the corporation actually means to put there, instead of it being something against the corporation, which is a statement about performance art and all of that stuff. So there is no stone unturned in this movie. I go back to one thing for me. It's how it made me feel. That made me feel when that guy started to describe what he thought was the reason why they made this statement with the statue at the end. It made me feel like when I was standing in a museum and I'm looking at a piece of art and it's making me feel a certain way, and somebody's going, I think the color blue means this and the green means this, and then if you just turn to the left and look at the shadow, it's supposed to invoke the Baroque feeling of devils. What? Just I'm feeling something here. Shut up. Like, and I'm sure that has a validity to it, because when I took an art history class, it blew my mind that all that stuff really does have meaning and purpose. And it does. But I think sometimes you just have to stand back from it and say, it makes me feel like this. This is what I'm feeling when this is happening. That's what's more important to me. And this movie continuously makes you feel things good, bad, indifferent, uncomfortable, nervousness, anxiety, excitement, joy, happiness, sadness, fear. It makes you feel everything in a unique visual way. So that's where I land with it. That's where I end with it. You can interpret it and tell me what he thought and what it's supposed to mean, but for me, it's how I felt.
Well, and for me, I think that what I appreciated about it is that there was so much thought and effort that went into this movie. This was not a movie that was just phoned in, and I can tell that there was a lot of care that went into this. I think it's a well-formed way of imparting his views on America and on capitalism and on big business and on race relations and all of those things. And I think that's kind of hard to do. So we don't see that. It's like he swung for the fences, and I think he made solid contact. So I think that especially nowadays, people are we haven't even talked about how this is an original idea. It's not based on any kind of intellectual property or a book or anything like that. And you rarely see that nowadays in movies. So it's not based on a true story or anything like that. It is a completely fabricated allegory that is pointing towards what's happening now and will be relevant later on. And I think that's pretty awesome. So all right, well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at Actor Engineer. And if you want, you can give us a review and rate us on iTunes. That really helps us out. All right, we'll see you next week.